Welcome to the What's Your Ceiling podcast. We're your hosts, Monte Wyatt and Paul Szynski. Wherever you are in life, there is a higher ceiling. This podcast is how you become aware of it and how to take action to push through it. It's time to discover your ceiling. Welcome to the What's Your Ceiling podcast, where we talk about your health, your family, your business. I'm Monte Wyatt.
I'm Paul Szynski.
And we are here to talk about some great things today, but we love to talk about family, business, and health, and we call our audience the Achiever. So you are always going to the next level. We want to give you some tips today. We want to help you see other experiences, and that's a big part of our show, What's Your Ceiling? So thank you for joining us. You know, we've got a theme today, and before I introduce our guest, I want to talk about our theme with Paul a little bit. And our theme is generational longevity, generational business longevity. And so when you think of longevity of a business, Paul, what do you think?
Well, I think it's amazing when you can take a company, and especially a family company, and go for years after years. And, you know, when you get to 80, 100, 150 years, that's an amazing. How can you do that? And to have the families and the people stay there. And I do believe that's why they are sustainable. I think that's one of the main ingredients, is that it's usually someone that has the passion, and it's usually a family member. And I think that's what I've found in my experience of a company being over 100 years old.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's about passion. It's about what the family is about, what they want to be known for. And it's continuing that generational aspect of it. The next son, the next daughter, the next person that's going to run it has to be passionate about that too.
Absolutely. And if they don't have that, you tend to find out that eventually it'll either be bought out or they're going to go disappear.
Yeah.
We've seen it over and over again.
Well, we've got a guest with us today that their family business has been in business for 158 years. And that's amazing. We're going to hear some great stories, but we've got a family business named Kurtz Hardware, started by his great-great-grandfather in 1866. Bob's a lifetime Des Moines resident and has been in the family business since he was a teenager in 73. And he's done different things from carpentry to machinist. He swept the floor. He's done inventory. He's done everything to make sure that we are a successful business. So you've been a part of the business full-time since 79, and we're really glad to have you a part of the show. So welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
You know, just to have you share a little bit about who you are and what your business is, just to share with our audience, if you would.
Like Monty said, Bob Kurtz with Kurtz Hardware Company, family business, fifth generation. Goes back to 1866. We're evolved today into the commercial door and hardware category of building materials.
Awesome. Now, tell us a little history of the business. You said your great-great-grandfather. How did they get to the country? What back in that time, they just come into the country, right?
They came from southeastern part or southwestern part of Germany, and they left Germany in 1851-2. Came to America for a better life. There was religious persecution going on in the area that they left, and he packed up his 11 kids, his wife, and decided to come to America, and came through New York, Pennsylvania, ended up in Iowa, and my great-great-grandfather worked in Iowa and opened his business in 1866.
Oh, that's fantastic.
You know what, Bob? That's really interesting. How there's a lot of immigrants come to this country and try to achieve success in the United States. You know, we've talked about this before. Is you have the majority of the people come here, they find a job and they do that. But then you have the people, the business-minded, small business people like your family that look and say, hey, I don't want to work in the coal mines. I don't want to be working for another company. So they go out and they find a way or a niche that they can feed their family. And obviously your forefathers, you're in the fifth generation, 158 years in business. Did it start day one with when they came over to found out, hey, the hardware business we need to get into, or how did you come to realize maybe the hardware business, or?
It evolved, I think, like all businesses do. And, back in those days, you learned a trade, and my great-great-grandfather learned a trade of tinsmithing, and he traveled around fixing, pots and pans in a covered wagon, as the story goes. And, one thing led to another, and he, learned a lot of different things. And when he opened his doors, it went from, tinsmithing to people asking him for different things that they needed to, Des Moines was a growing community at the time. And, people needed stuff for, buildings they're building. And, it just evolved into the hardware, the tools, got into sporting goods and all the different aspects that the business turned into over the years.
Well, I think also it's the time period of when that happened. People were just, a lot of times people were just trying to feed their family. And so a lot of people lived off the land, they lived off doing the things that they, farmers, a lot of farmers, because they could feed their family. And then you come along realizing these people might need tools. And especially in the Great Depression. And so tell us a little bit about that and how that.
Well, during the Great Depression, people were struggling, and, where you would may have somebody do the work for you. Most people couldn't afford it, so they did it themselves, and they needed the tools and the supplies in order to, fix their house or their business or, whatever they were working on, their farm implement product or, whatever they needed to sustain their life, whether it was shelter or what they did for a living. And, I think that was one of the things that he could make things, he could fix things, and he got into supplying things for those needs.
Yeah, that's interesting because so you didn't obviously have a manufacturer you could go to or a wholesaler you went to get goods. They actually made their product and then sold it.
Right. Mainly as it related to like tin smithing or pots and pans or stovepipe or that kind of thing, I believe. I don't believe they actually made any tools, but they could have. They found people that could supply them and bought them and then resold them.
Do you know what, in that time, so you're coming 1866, what time did you find that you switched to where you started using manufacturer, where you weren't producing your own stuff? Was that, that's interesting. I never thought of that, Monte, is, as obviously the people that came into this country had to build their own stuff.
Yeah.
Where did you see the industrial age really start for you guys? It was supposedly started, 1900?
Yeah, I would think maybe a little before that, because, it's one thing about, you look at farmers today. I mean, you go in their shops, and if they need something, they kind of make it, Mm-hmm. Maybe not as much, but back then, farming, you needed to know how to do a lot of different things, and they needed the tools to do it. And, I mean, I remember going into some farm shops when, my cousins lived on a farm and going to their neighbors. And, I mean, if he was in there making it.
Yeah.
So yeah. I don't know if I got off track.
Yeah, it is. People into this are pretty creative in what they built. So you guys end up coming here, and then so at one point you decided we're going to open a brick and mortar building and call it a hardware store and start selling stuff. Hardware stores back in those days was kind of general store, hardware store where you went to kind of get pretty much everything. Nowadays it's more, specialized, of course. It'll probably continue to be that way. But I believe that he opened it as a tin smithing machine shop. I'm not 100% sure.
And then customers just came in and started asking for this, and he just asking for that, and he came and just started adding. And then I think, an interesting story is in St. Louis World's Fair in 1904, plumbing was becoming a mainstay, and we supplied the plumbing fixtures for the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I've got a few of those stories to tell.
What year was that?
1904.
You got that's interesting. That was probably what you call advertisement back then, showing up.
Oh yeah, I was thinking of this, preparing for this, and today would probably be equivalent to AI or electrical cars. The kind of the new thing. Going, and most of those people lived on farms. Going to indoor plumbing was kind of a, hey, this is the cat's meow kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah, we're pretty lucky today. We don't realize how far we've come along. But so when you got into your business, and probably I'm guessing a family business is, you grew up as a kid that you worked in the business, and everybody generationally worked in the business. You all had to work in the business, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. It pretty much didn't really get involved until high school. I think, my mom and my dad wanted to kind of, focus on your education, be a kid, live those young years. But, I started wanting things. I wanted a car. I wanted a mini bike. I wanted, certain things. Well, if you want it, you got to go work for it. Okay, well, what can I do? Mowing yards, shoveling snow. And, as I got older, I worked for my dad doing inventory, and that was kind of one of the first things. I mean, my very first job, I remember when I went to work, was my dad comes in, and we've been in downtown Des Moines. The building we were in, or the block we were on, when we moved to our new location on Keogh, which is relatively new, we've been there 40 years. We were on the same block for 116 years.
Wow.
But back to my story. I come to work, and he hands me a bucket of tar and says, go up on the roof, fix where it's leaking, That was my first job, going up on the roof. But, it evolved to, doing the inventory, learning the business, kind of hands-on thing. It was fun, challenging, and I wouldn't change a thing.
One thing, back in those days, there was you had a lot of kids back then. Families had kids. I mean, when your great-grandfather came over from Germany and your great-grandmother, they had probably several kids, and then you had to travel here and kind of tell us a little bit about that, and then your size of your family.
When my great-great-grandfather came over from Germany, he had 11 kids, and anywhere from the age of, I think, 20 to 6 months. Irish Catholic, German Catholic then, but, they came to Pennsylvania, and worked their way here. And, my dad's grandfather, my dad's dad, my grandfather, there was only 3 of them in their family. And, my dad came from a family of 6. My mom came from a family of 6. You had to have those kids where, I think if you had a farm, I mean, of course, those were the workers, that's right. Why they had a lot of kids. But I'm not sure if I had.
So when you immigrated and you worked your way all the way to Iowa, how many kids were left?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting story. There were the parents and then 11 kids that got off the boat in New York City in 1852. And by the time they got to Iowa, all but 3 were left. And my great-great-grandfather was the oldest, and I believe he was around 14. And I don't know if the other twos were boys or girls, but, they went to work. They got off the boat in Keokuk, and his parents, or his father, I think his mother died somewhere in Pennsylvania because of cholera or some disease that they had that was pretty prevalent back then. But when they got off the boat in Keokuk, my great-great-grandfather died on the boat, and they buried him. He's buried down in Keokuk someplace. We've tried to try and find it, but it's, you're going back 1852.
Yeah, it's a couple of years.
But,
well, it's kind of interesting because another thing a lot of people probably don't know is you got generational alumni of graduates from the University of Notre Dame.
Yes.
And good Catholic Dowling in Des Moines, Iowa. And you didn't always follow that path.
No, I did not. I was more of a public school, Greenwood, Merrill, Roosevelt person. But all of my wife, my older brother, pretty much everyone in my family either went to St. Joseph's, was the girls' side, and Dowling was the boys' side, and they merged. But my wife and, of course, all of my kids went through Dowling as well. So
that's interesting.
The Notre Dame connection was my dad's family, all of my dad's brothers, and he had 3 brothers, 2 himself and 2 others. It was kind of, that's where you went, and so it was fun. I actually went this year or last year to my very first Notre Dame football game. It was pretty cool, those people, they tailgate, and it was a lot of fun. But it was strange because when my mom and dad got married, he went to Notre Dame, and then he quit to go to the war, and then when he came back, he went back to Dowling, or back to Notre Dame, and my mom and they were married, and they were expecting their first child, my older brother. So it was fun going back there and thinking of that. I actually met Rudy when I was there too.
Oh,
that's awesome.
Fun. Yeah.
Bob, our audience is called the Achiever. They're always going to the next level. Tell us a little bit about what has kept you going through all the years. What's been your motivation? What's been your drive to keep the family business going for so long?
Well, we talked about this earlier, passion. I really, when I, was getting into the business, I had an older brother, and we didn't see things the same, and I just figured I wasn't going to be in the family business, and I came back into the business after my father called me and said, your brother and I have decided to go, he decided to go do something different, and if I wanted anything to do with the business, I needed to come back. I'd followed a girl down to Arizona and was down there, and he called me and said, this is the deal. And I said, well, give me a week, let me think about it. And I thought about it. And, family business, I didn't realize how deep it was in my blood until that time. Just working there, it was just kind of a job. It was a thing I did. And then I realized that, okay, this is your time. This is your turn to take and do, your part. But it was a passion. I enjoy it. On that trip back from Arizona, I came back into town the day the Pope was here. So maybe it was a sign that, hey, come on back, run the family business. And it's been fun, challenging. I'm sure like every business out there, all the different aspects, but I do enjoy it a lot. I like the trying to stay up on the technology and stuff that's new. And I don't know if that.
I'm sure at the dinner table you had a lot of conversations. Small businesses, even when you're not at the business, you're talking business. Could you tell us a little bit about what it was like to sit at the dinner table with your dad, your family, and conversations you had?
Well, other than other than fighting with my big brother for the last piece of food on the table with 6 kids. He actually put a fork in my hand because I reached for the last piece of corn once. It was, from a business standpoint, it was, Dad always talked about, they had different buildings downtown that they had different supplies in, and, different issues. And, he talked about many different things, some of the stories at the dinner table, some not. But, I remember him talking about, as a little kid, driving around with his dad and his grandfather, and the Depression and the effect on everybody, and how it was just a time that was hard on everybody. And even we couldn't, well, according to the story, you couldn't get material. You couldn't get, it's almost equivalent to what happened in COVID. You couldn't get material because nobody was working. It kind of mirrors that. But the stories around the dinner table were, I didn't realize how valuable they were until later. I really didn't.
Yeah, I think a lot of small family businesses, that conversation you have around your kids and building that business, and the business acronym you pick up from that is unbelievable, just listening to it, being in the room. But you had, after a while, you had the big box stores show up, Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards. How did that affect you? And tell us a little bit how that affected you. What do you look for when you look at employees to help support your business?
Well, first part of that is, we transitioned out of the retail business, into the contract distributor side of the business. And it was kind of a thing that, I wanted to do. Retail took up a lot of time, and I wanted to, because I wanted to spend weekends with my kids and stuff. And we made that transition because of an accident that happened at the building where the roof literally fell in, and it gave us an opportunity to do that. So,
about what year was that you made that transition?
That would have been 98.
98, okay.
Yeah.
So about 26 years ago, you switched over. You started going into the
more commercial.
Commercial.
And, it was more specialized people in what we do. We deal with architects and contractors and, building developers and, that kind of stuff. And it's a different quality or type of person, that you need to kind of be in the mid-level of that type of business that you do. And of course you have shop guys, the welders, and the people that build the doors and frames and that. And then you have, all your support people. Second part of your question was
people, to be sustainable for 158 years, and you've had a family member involved for 158 years. You've got to have some little bit of a secret sauce there on keeping people and building that business and be sustainable.
Yeah, and I think that evolves as well. And I think just to the core of it is trying to provide a place for people to grow and experience and, have a life and learn and, provide for their families. It's challenging today. And some of that, I believe, from technology and a little bit of COVID residualness of things changed. But we were talking about this a little earlier that, culture is a big thing, and it's, I think every one of the different generations had a culture that they ran, and I think that's really a good part. The culture, the people, being able to teach them right, and then, having the products to provide.
And another thing we talked about, Bob, we talked a little bit about core values and what you look for in that employee. And, you said something I think is really important and what you're looking for in that employee. Could you tell us a little bit about what you're looking for there?
Well, a good person, being a good person, honesty, I think they're pretty basic, you would think today. It's sometimes challenging, but yeah, people that want to grow, they want to learn, they, are passionate about what they do. It really comes down to, what drives the person, and trying to align that. And, as we were talking earlier, aligning some of those things sometimes can be extremely challenging, and sometimes people that don't line up, they end up kind of moving on naturally. Mm-hmm. But someone had said to me that providing somebody a job that is sustainable, whether you're there or not, something that they can take with them to whether it's another job or in their life, because a sustainable business is, an old family business. Sometimes it's a struggle to change to the new ways. I remember doing it when I took over the business for my dad. He had his ways. I wanted to change them, and I'm sure it was the same for when he did it. And one of the first things that I did is I wanted to computerize all the inventory and and do things more technology wise. And he didn't like it at all until it came down to being able to print out the financials, in the end of the day and say, here's where we are. And he loved that, of course, because he was a bean counter.
Yeah, absolutely. That's Monte, as a business coach as yourself, I think, like Bob said, a lot of people think it's real simple, but when it all comes down to those core values and what we're looking for, we're all the same.
Yeah.
And we're looking for those good human beings, those people that want to show up and want to work and are disciplined and have a passion. That's a big thing. Do they have a passion to really grow as in their job and as a human being? Because I think that's what we're finding out. And the longer you're in business, the more you see that. Yeah. And but that was I love that remark, Bob, and I think you're right on. And Monte, you might want to add to that. Because you're dealing with hundreds of people over the last businesses, and tell us what
we've talked about this a lot. Business is about people, and you got to have the right people on the team, and they've got to behave the way you want them to behave, and if they aren't treating the customer right, or they aren't showing up to work on time, or they aren't interacting well with others, you've got to make a change. And so you got to have the right culture. You got to hire the right people. You got to make sure that the right people stick around and the wrong people aren't there any longer. And that's okay. It doesn't make them bad people. It just means that they don't fit the organization. Right. And I think that's an important thing to recognize, is that you got to have the right people. And it sounds like you really find the person that they care about others, they do the right thing, and they're making the best decisions that they can.
But also that's really important. A lot of people got to realize is sometimes it isn't about people. It might be the businessman. He's got to become a better businessman to attract the right people.
That's right.
And sometimes, and you see it a lot. You see a lot that entrepreneurs, they start a business and they know what they're doing, but they're not training their employees correctly. And then all of a sudden you get conflict, and then they level out and they never break through another ceiling. But if you, now not to say that entrepreneur can't change, but if he doesn't adapt and change, that realizing it is the people, and to go from one ceiling to another ceiling, it's all about scaling with people and putting that team together.
I absolutely agree. And as Monte was saying it and you were saying it, is, I've made mistakes in that realm of that, and I've learned from them, and it's constantly learning, but, it's definitely something I need to get better at and continue to get better at over thing. Cause, sometimes you're so deep in the forest, you can't see the trees kind of thing.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of limiting beliefs that people have, stories we tell ourselves. And tell us about a belief as whether you were taking over the business or you're changing direction of the business, a belief that you had to overcome to help go to that next level, to help you think differently about the business and how you had to grow through that.
Wow. That's a great question. And I know that, changing the direction of the business was a big one for me. Implementing technology for that. And, just keeping your eyes and ears open and looking for I'm kind of stuck here because it's kind of a.
Well, think about what did you have to overcome to make that decision? What did you have to do differently or think differently to go down to that narrow product of doors and hardware and finding a new market that really got more specific than where you had been?
Well, if you look at the reasons why I did it is, first thing was my family. I wanted to spend my weekends with my young family at the time. I wanted to focus on, something that I understood and enjoyed. Not that I didn't enjoy the retail business. It's just that it was, we had, tool department. We had a hardware department. We had a, farm and garden department, which was garden tools and that kind of stuff. We had a paint department. I wanted to kind of simplify and focus more because I think seeing, and I don't know, looking back at it, maybe I had a little foresight to just, but you had Lowe's and Home Depot and Menards coming in, building 150,000 square foot facilities. I could kind of see the writing on the wall. But I think the drive was to focus more on the business part of what I wanted to do.
I really liked a couple of things that you said that I want to reinforce to our audience. Every business owner has to do this. Sometimes you have to simplify and focus. You have to get to specialize because you recognize what's going on in the marketplace. And that's part of what you said because you had the big boxes coming in, getting more of the broad product line, and you chose to get very specialized.
Yeah.
And you saw the future a little bit. You saw the future of if you had to grow and change to make sure that your company did survive. And I think that's a powerful thing for everybody to recognize because sometimes you have to change your product line to continue on because taking that generational business to the next step, keep going, keep building it, you've got to make adjustments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the only way to be sustainable, you got to be able to change. Change is big. I think another thing I got out of our talk today is culture. Culture is big, and I know that you talked about that. And I appreciate you talking about that because that starts with the leadership and that starts with you as the business owner is building that culture. And there's only one way you can be sustainable for 158 years is that culture is to build a good, positive culture that people want to come to and customers. I know we talked about you built long-term relationship with a lot of your customers, your good customers. Right. Not only they come, you go on trips together, I understand. Is that right?
Yep. Yep. I need to continually sharpen the axe, and in the way that I deal with my people and my business and all of that. And it's, it's the rewarding part of the business, seeing things, go in the right direction.
what's a challenge or the next ceiling that you're working on going through right now? What's the next thing, your next area that you're developing for yourself or the business?
Well, right now I seem to have my head kind of wrapped around in how AI is going to affect my business moving forward. I think it's going to make a drastic change, from the architects to the way things are being built to how things are being supplied. I think it's big, and it kind of reminds me of, a friend of mine was an accountant, and I remember when laptop computers came out. I mean, he had this thing that was a big suitcase that he'd take home, and it was his portable, computer. You look back at it now and you laugh, but it's kind of that same era, of what's coming, what's it going to be, and it's extremely interesting, challenging, and just kind of keeping your eyes on the horizon.
Yeah, I think that's a critical thing, is keeping your eyes on the horizon. What's the next thing that's coming out? And that's a new challenge and a new way of thinking for everybody. Everybody's got to figure out how best can AI help their business. And I think it's a learning tool. It's an efficiency tool. We've got to figure out how it's going to help every one of us. So I'm glad that that's what you're going through. And how much time do you spend thinking about things like that?
I'm going to say a fair amount, because I've always kind of been a technology guy. One of the things that, I've always had to learn things kind of differently because I have dyslexia, and my mom figured it out at a young age. So I just learned things differently, and I put my, I realized later on that I needed to not look at it as a negative. I needed to grab the bull by the horns, and I just, I learned things differently. And, most of the time it's an asset. Of course I've done things that, haven't worked out, but, if you don't try, you're not working at it. Right. So,
So you're telling me you didn't bat 1,000?
Yeah, didn't bat 1,000. That's right. I'm human.
Yeah, you're human. Well, if you can bat 300 or better, a lot of times you make the All-Star. So 3 out of 10 ain't bad.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely right.
What a good meeting. Good. I really enjoyed, Bob, your insight.
There's always a question we like to ask at the end to get some more insight from you. What do you want to be known for?
I saw that. Of course, I want to be known as a good father, husband, wife, to my wife. I mean, a good person, a good businessman, just really being a good person, and, whether it's family, friends, work, all of the things that life, the path that you go down in life, that's what I'd like to be known for.
That's awesome. I think that's a great way to look at it, is what do we want to leave as the message, and it's being a good person,
right.
Being that great father, being that great husband, and I think that's powerful. Paul, this was a great conversation. I think we started off with the theme with longevity and generational presence, and I think we've heard some great stories from Bob. Is there any other stories you want to share with us to tell about your experience? You've got lots of stories, and I just want to see if there's any others you had on your mind.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. How long is your podcast run for? One story that I tell whenever I talk about the business is, going back to 1866 in downtown Des Moines, when my great-great-grandfather started the business, I was poking around in the old library that used to be on the river. Now it's the food price building downtown. I think I said that right. Anyway, I'd go over there and spend my lunch kind of going through articles. And I remember going back and wanting to see old papers, and I found it, and it was precursor to the Register and Tribune, whichever one it was. And I ran across an article, and it says, well, we want to let you know that Mr. Kurtz is opening his business today, and we wish him all the best of luck. way out there, and he was on 3rd Street between Court and Walnut.
Which is what, a mile from downtown?
And it was just, just the statement that it said, and, talked about wood sidewalks and that. The other stories are, the people that come in the store, when we were down on 312 Walnut Street, which is now the Plaza building downtown. We were on that block for 116 years when we moved in 1983 for that to be redeveloped, is the number of people that have come in that, over the years that, I bought my first roller skate here. I bought my first BB gun here. Just the stories of these guys. And, the state fair would bring in people from all over, farmers from all over. It was interesting. And the people, and just a last story is the manifest that we got showing that my great-great-great-grandfather came through the port of New York. A customer walked through the door and asked my dad, I said, "Are you a Kurtz?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, I think I have something you might be interested in." And shows this to my dad. And there they were, all 11 kids and the mother and father, and just like, wow. And another thing would be a good way to end is my dad always said that you never know what's going to walk through the front door.
Yep.
And it was so true. It was just so true. God rest his soul.
I really loved you sharing the stories of your family and how you got started and your experiences through the business. So I really appreciate you joining us today. And I think that's been fun.
It's been great.
That's good. I appreciate it.
Yeah. What an example of a business in America, in building a business in America. It's a perfect example of capitalism, someone building a company, and what a great country to be in.
Yes.
Build a family.
Absolutely.
Good.
Well, I want to say thank you to our achiever, our audience, for joining us, and hopefully you gained a couple insights to help your organization continue to grow and continue to be a generational and longevity company. And so really appreciate it. Make sure you like us, make sure you subscribe, and keep watching What You're Sealing, and we appreciate you joining us. Thank you.